Protesters have been targeting Liberal leader Justin Trudeau's events in particular, and as you noted there, he was forced to cancel a campaign rally last Friday because of safety concerns. Hecklers have also disrupted NDP leader Jagmeet Singh's announcements. Sabreena Delhon is the executive director of the SAMbot Centre for Democracy. It's a nonpartisan group that promotes democracy in Canada, and it's been looking at social media activity during the election campaign. She joins us now from Toronto. Good afternoon.
Hello.
What do you make of these protests? And I should note that we're very much visibly seeing them on our screens, but they're also playing out online. All this happening right in the midst of an election campaign.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that the SAMbot Centre is interested in being live to in terms of monitoring and tracking. So during the election, we have a bot that's active on Twitter that's analyzing toxic tweets received by political party leaders and incumbent candidates. What we're doing is measuring what many understand in the political community anecdotally to be a toxic online environment. And it is, sadly not surprising because what was borne out over the weekend is very much reflected in the data that we've analyzed so far.
And let's talk about who's being targeted by that, because even when we're outside of an election campaign, women in politics in particular face seemingly vastly more garbage online. Is that bearing out in what you're seeing?
It is. The person who's getting the most toxic tweets in our analysis is Justin Trudeau. And when we exclude him from the group, we find that incumbent candidates that are women in the Liberal Party are getting over 5 times the amount of toxicity than men in the same party. And so that's showing a pretty significant difference in just the day-to-day experience on the job, a sense of safety at work, and to note that the toxicity that women are receiving is generally misogynistic, it's sexist, it has an increased severity overall than what men would likely face.
So let's talk about the pictures that we're now seeing. We're seeing people bring their children, young children, who are sticking up their middle fingers. We're seeing police officers there trying to protect candidates, having racial slurs hurled at them. We're seeing something that we perhaps are more accustomed to seeing at U.S. rallies and U.S. events that has been percolating in Canada, but not seemingly to the nature, to the degree that it is now. Where's it all coming from?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, we've seen the pro-democracy aspects of social media over the last 10 years. It's a great way to share information, to connect with your constituents. It's a great way to have disagreements in a civil way. But something else is going on, and that's also, what we're interested in measuring. There's been an increase in incivility online. There's also an increase in partisanship in Canada as well. And this is a situation that we need to be responding to, because what happens online has real consequences in real life, as we saw over the weekend. I can give you a sense of our data, if you like, which is illustrating that.
Go ahead.
A lot of what we've seen, yeah, sure. So what we've seen so far is 7% of the, nearly 500,000 tweets that we've analyzed so far are in the severely toxic range. So those are threatening messages. They're ones that you might block or report. But we're actually finding that the 20% of the messages we've seen so far that are in the moderate end of the toxicity scale are doing the most damage, because they don't warrant getting dismissed or blocked, but they're doing a great deal of harm. They're often coming at candidates at a rate of dozens, hundreds, or even thousands at a time. And so if you're a candidate or a political staffer on the receiving end of these relentless and insidious messages, it's really going to take a toll. It's death by 1,000 cuts. And there aren't a lot of people who can handle that kind of abuse day in and day out on the job, and this really affects the electorate. It results in people steering clear from the political conversation because they're either bored by the toxicity or numbed by it or intimidated. And this is limiting civic engagement, which is ultimately bad for our democracy.
And I think there are people who are not at all surprised, people who have spent time on social media, Twitter in particular, looking at how things have evolved and who's being targeted, and with the increasingly seemingly nasty nature of it all. And yet there are also people who are going to be very surprised at what they're seeing and are trying now to grasp why, where it's come from. Is it just a product of the time in which we exist? Where are you at on that?
Well, yeah, certainly this is a problem for our era. And when we looked at tweets from the weekend in particular, we looked at about 200,000. The proportion of the toxicity, what percentage was severely toxic, what percentage was moderately toxic, it was actually the same as what we've seen from our first week. So we saw a bump in activity. We saw an increased number of tweets over the weekend, but the toxicity levels were about the same. So one way to look at these results is to think, well, I guess this is just how it is online. You know, this is what's simmering away all the time, and it can bubble over and cause harm in our actual lives. So this shows us this is a serious problem. It's affecting us, and we need to take it seriously. And there's an opportunity here for political parties to respond to what's going on.
Sabreena Delhon, thank you very much for your time, your thoughts on what unfortunately is becoming an ever bigger trend in our political life.
Thank you.